Hey guys, tonight we slip into the cool dusk of ancient Thebes, where the air still clings to the warmth of the desert sun, but the sandstone walls are already throwing long shadows. You find yourself standing before the temple complex at Karnak, the largest religious site in Egypt, and honestly, you probably won't survive even a week of priestly duties here. There's way too much standing, fasting, and memorizing for anyone raised on Netflix and snack breaks. But that's okay because you're only here for a bedtime stroll through their secret nightly routines. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you do, drop a comment below with your location and the local time. I love seeing where and when everyone's tuning in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand before massive pylons carved with scenes of gods towering over bound captives. The torches flicker, throwing shadows that make the carvings almost look like they're breathing. You're expected to pass beneath these gates as the sun sinks and the first stars start to poke out, and you can almost hear the muffled chanting deep inside the halls. The smell of resin and smoke reaches your nose before you step 1 foot inside. This temple is less house of worship and more cosmic machine, at least in the way the Egyptians thought about it. Every carved figure, every statue, every alignment of the stone is meant to maintain Ma'at, that delicate balance of order against chaos. Historians still argue whether the temple's astronomical alignments were intended to track precise stellar events or simply to impress visiting dignitaries. But you don't have time to untangle that debate because you're already being ushered past the outer court. The sandstone under your feet still radiates the day's heat, but the halls ahead are cool and echoing. You walk slowly, sandals scraping, while the walls rise higher and the sky narrows above you. You're entering a space designed to feel like creation itself. Columns shaped like papyrus and lotus rising around you like the swamp of beginnings. If you're feeling small, that's intentional. The Egyptians wanted you to feel like a single reed in an infinite marsh. Ahead, the other priests gather in small knots. They nod but don't smile because this is serious business. No giggling at the back like a modern choir practice. They're preparing to wash, to shave, to oil themselves, and to recite prayers that will, in their view, keep the very sun rising tomorrow. Imagine that pressure. You forget to mumble the right word, and suddenly a Ra oversleeps. You don't want that on your conscience. The ambient sound here is hypnotic. A low chant, the whisper of linen robes brushing the floor, the faint hum of insects in the twilight. You smell burnt frankincense, a sweet smokiness that clings to your nose and makes you want to sneeze, but you dare not. A statue of Amun looms in the dim distance, and even though you know it's stone, its eyes seem to track you. A quirky little tidbit. Some temple statues had actual gemstones for eyes, which caught candlelight and gave the unnerving illusion that they were alive. If you've ever had the sense that your Alexa speaker is watching you, imagine a 4-meter-tall granite god doing the same thing. The priests around you begin their procession inward. You shuffle along, trying not to trip over your own feet because these temple floors are uneven, cracks and chips smoothed by thousands of sandals over centuries. Every step you take echoes, a hollow clap that makes you feel both intrusive and part of the rhythm. And here's your first reality check. You are not some honored guest. You are a worker bee in the hive of the cosmos. Your duties will keep you awake half the night, and if you're lucky, you might catch a nap curled against a column before dawn. The temple isn't about comfort. It's about ritual precision, about oiling gears you can't even see. As the gates behind you close with a thud, you realize you're sealed in for the night. Outside, the city fades into darkness, but in here, the flicker of lamps keeps the walls alive. A thin haze of smoke begins to build already, and your throat itches faintly. You think of modern fire alarms and wish for one, but here smoke is a sign of holiness, not danger. The chant rises, soft but steady. You catch words you almost recognize, names of gods, endless epithets, titles stacked like dominoes. Egyptians loved their divine job descriptions. Amun isn't just king of gods, he's hidden one. Bull of his mother, lord of thrones, who listens to prayers, who hears not the cries of the wicked, except on Tuesdays. Okay, maybe not that last bit, but the list does feel endless. You suspect even the priests sometimes lose track, but they'd never admit it. And there, as you stand breathing the incense-heavy air, you notice the strange comfort of it all. The temple, intimidating as it is, has a rhythm that feels predictable. The rituals have been performed the same way for hundreds of years and will continue long after your dust. Your role is small, but the pattern is eternal. That thought, oddly, makes your eyelids feel heavier. Still, you press forward into the growing dimness, because the night has only just begun. The secret bedtime rituals are waiting, and you're not allowed to nap until the gods themselves have been put properly to bed. You step out of the main hall and into the side courtyard, where the sound of rushing water greets you. It isn't a fountain, not some romantic bubbling feature. It's a stone channel carrying Nile water into a rectangular pool. The water glints in the lamplight, black and cold, as though it's daring you to step in. You do, of course, because if you're a priest, there's no way around it. Washing in silence is your first nightly duty. The shock hits immediately. The Nile in the evening isn't warm, it's liquid stone, clamping around your skin, and you bite down on your tongue to avoid yelping. Every priest must purify himself before entering deeper into the temple, and that means immersing fully. The ancient texts say 3 or 4 times a day was common, but at night it's most important. You dunk yourself under, ears filling with the muffled hush of water, and when you emerge, your breath comes in gasps. This purification isn't about dirt. You could have just scrubbed yourself in a basin at home. This is about removing spiritual grime, the sort that supposedly clings to you during the day from hearing lies or bumping elbows with people who didn't wash properly. Historians still argue whether these frequent baths were genuinely effective against disease or just symbolic, but either way, you're shivering, dripping, and cleaner than you've been all week. You glance around and notice the priests take the plunge with practiced calm. They step in, lower themselves gracefully, come up without fuss, and step out again. You, meanwhile, look like a wet cat that slipped into the bathtub. One of them side-eyes you, and you imagine he's thinking, rookie. Once you've waded out, there's no towel service. You stand dripping, shaking droplets onto the stone floor, waiting for the dry night air to wick the chill away. The silence here is thick. Nobody speaks during the wash. The only sound is the slap of water against skin, the trickle of it back into the pool, the occasional cough. You almost say something, maybe a joke to break the tension, but you catch yourself. Even whispering here feels like yelling in a library. There's an odd little tidbit about this stage. Priests were expected to wash not just their bodies, but also their mouths with natron, a naturally occurring salt. It tasted vile. Imagine gargling chalk mixed with baking soda, but it doubled as an early toothpaste. You swish the gritty brine around your teeth, grimace, and spit into the channel. Your tongue feels like it's been sanded, but hey, no morning breath for the gods. You step aside to let others pass, standing on the smooth flagstones now slick with water. The moon is climbing higher, casting faint light across the pool. A mosquito buzzes near your ear, drawn to your damp skin, and you slap at it in vain. Mosquitoes don't respect sanctity. Somewhere in the reeds beyond the walls, frogs croak in a lazy chorus. The priests ignore them, but you find the sound oddly soothing, a natural ASMR track layered beneath the human rituals. One priest nearby is muttering under his breath, words too soft to catch. You wonder if he's sneaking in a prayer or just reciting tomorrow's to-do list. Either way, his lips move with the steady rhythm of someone who's done this thousands of times. That's the thing. This isn't a novelty for them. This is their life, their job, their endless repetition. It's like clocking into a night shift at a celestial factory. You look down at your dripping arms and realize how raw your skin feels. Cold water, rough natron, endless repetition. It's not exactly a spa night. Still, there's a kind of quiet dignity in it. You're aligning yourself with thousands of years of tradition, standing in the same courtyard where countless others have shivered and spat and prayed before you. The walls don't change. The stars don't change. Only the humans cycle through. As you stand there shaking off the last drops, a memory drifts into your head. Earlier in the day, you saw fishermen gutting tilapia on the riverbank, their scales flashing like coins in the sun. Now, at night, you're the one gutted, stripped down, emptied out, rinsed of anything unworthy. The gods, it seems, prefer their servants filleted clean of sin. One priest finally breaks the silence, whispering a chant as he steps out of the water. The words are old, older than the columns around you, syllables that roll like the Nile itself. You don't catch the meaning, but the tone is unmistakable, devotion layered with exhaustion. You imagine the gods smiling faintly, amused by mortals going through such effort just to keep the cosmic lights on. You shuffle toward the next chamber, dripping footprints fading behind you. The air grows heavier with incense as you approach, masking the damp smell of Nile mud still clinging to your toes. Ahead lies the shaving room, and if you thought cold water was bad, wait until you meet the razors. You duck into the smaller chamber where the air feels warmer, though not exactly welcoming. Lamps line the walls, and in the middle you see what looks like a barber's corner, but without the soothing chatter or the cheerful hum of clippers. Instead, you're about to encounter one of the strictest priestly requirements. Every single hair must go. The attendants wait with gleaming bronze razors, their edges sharp enough to nick a careless finger. You take a seat on a low stool, heart sinking, as you realize this isn't going to be a neat little trim. The rules say priests must shave their entire bodies every other day, sometimes daily, because hair is considered impure. No eyebrows, no eyelashes, not even a scraggly chest hair allowed. You may think your modern razor burn is bad, but this? This is devotion that itches. The bronze blade scrapes across your scalp with a faint metallic rasp. Cold oil is smeared across your skin to reduce the sting, but it doesn't stop the ticklish tug as each stubborn patch of hair yields. The smell of the oil is strong. Castor and a hint of cedar, earthy and a little acrid. You wonder if the gods are pleased or just laughing at the sight of a temple full of bald, glistening men shining like polished onions. There's a mainstream fact that might comfort you. Hygiene was central to Egyptian priesthood, and shaving reduced lice infestations, which were rampant in the ancient world. It wasn't just ritual, it was practical. Still, the process is tedious. You feel each stroke of the blade as if it's taking a sliver of your patience along with the hair. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some priests even shaved their eyebrows to signal absolute dedication, which meant their expressions always looked faintly surprised. Imagine an entire choir of wide-eyed, perpetually startled men chanting in unison. Not exactly intimidating, but definitely memorable. Historians still argue whether the hairlessness was truly demanded by divine law or exaggerated by later writers, trying to romanticize Egyptian piety. Maybe some priests cheated, leaving a patch under the armpit just for comfort. But tonight, under these watchful eyes, you don't dare gamble. Every strand must go. The scraping continues. Arms, chest, even legs. You shift uncomfortably on the stool as the bronze catches a stubborn spot, leaving a faint sting behind. One attendant mutters under his breath, clearly annoyed at your fidgeting. You try to hold still, but the urge to laugh bubbles up. The sensation is somewhere between sandpaper and a very aggressive cat grooming you. You bite your lip, shoulders shaking, and almost lose it when a fellow priest lets out a loud sneeze mid-shave. The chamber echoes with suppressed snickers, quickly silenced. Your head feels oddly light once bare, as if a weight you didn't know existed has been lifted. You rub your smooth scalp, marveling at how vulnerable it feels. No buffer, no fuzz, just you and the cold air. It's strangely calming, though you suspect the mosquitoes outside are plotting revenge. The ritual shaving isn't just about hair, it's about resetting. Each day, each night, you're scraped back down to blankness, as if to remind you that nothing belongs to you, not even the hair that naturally grows. You're a canvas, wiped clean for the gods to paint on, whether you like their chosen colors or not. When it's finally done, your skin glows faintly with oil and your body feels raw but renewed. You stand, running a hand across your shin just to confirm, yes, smoother than polished limestone. The attendants wipe their razors and nod, unimpressed. For them, this is routine. For you, it's another step deeper into the strange rhythm of sacred sleep prep. As you shuffle toward the robe room, your bare skin prickling against the night air, you imagine how you'll look when fully dressed again. Without hair, the white linen will cling differently, almost too perfectly. You might resemble a mannequin more than a man, a blank figure animated by chance and duties. The thought is both eerie and oddly soothing. You pass a small side niche where a statue of Thoth, ibis-headed god of knowledge, stands with a half-smile carved into his beak. The flickering lamplight makes it seem like he's raising a feathery eyebrow at your gleaming skull, as if to say, "Welcome to the club, Baldy." You stifle a laugh and continue on, the smell of oils and incense mixing into a haze around you. Ahead, folded linen robes await, crisp and whisper-light, promising both comfort and constriction. The chamber ahead greets you with the faint rustle of cloth. Stacks of freshly laundered linen are piled high, their pale folds catching lamplight in a way that makes them glow faintly golden. You reach for a robe, its fabric cool against your shaved skin, and immediately understand why Egyptian priests looked so pristine in paintings. Linen doesn't lie. It clings in all the wrong places, squeaks faintly as it brushes, and carries the subtle perfume of lotus blossoms rubbed into it during washing. You slip the garment over your head, careful not to tug at the hem, and suddenly feel cocooned. The robe is stark white, unadorned, deliberately plain. No colors, no patterns, no jewelry. The whole point is humility. You're not here to dazzle with fashion. You're here to fade into the temple's rhythm. Still, the linen feels surprisingly soft, especially compared to the scraping razors from earlier. It tickles at your freshly shaven scalp, and for a moment you want to rub your head against the fabric like a content cat. Here's a solid historical fact. Linen was the primary fabric of ancient Egypt, prized not only for its comfort in the heat, but for its symbolic purity. Wool was considered ritually unclean and strictly forbidden in temples. If you turned up in sheep's clothing, you wouldn't be allowed within a mile of the sanctuary. Egyptians believed linen mirrored light and was therefore aligned with divine order. So, in a sense, you're walking around draped in a portable sunrise. You glance around and notice the uniformity. Every priest looks nearly identical in these robes. Smooth heads, pale cloth, faint sheen of oil on their skin. It's almost eerie, like stepping into a room of clones. Yet within that sameness, there's a quiet humor. One priest's robe is clearly a size too big, trailing dangerously close to the floor. Another has tucked his too tightly, making him resemble a wrapped parcel. No one comments, but the sidelong glances suggest silent amusement. A quirky tidbit sneaks into your thoughts. Sometimes priests wore multiple layers of linen robes, not for warmth, but to show extra devotion. Imagine sweltering in triple layers during a Theban summer, chanting praises while sweating like a baked onion. Comfort was never the point. Endurance was. You tug at your single robe and silently thank the gods you're not on the multi-layer shift tonight. Historians still argue whether the whiteness of the robes was strictly maintained in all periods, or whether some temples tolerated off-white, slightly beige garments when supplies were scarce. If you ask the stern-looking attendant watching you dress, though, he'd say only snow-pure linen counts. He smooths a crease from your shoulder with a brisk flick, as if erasing evidence of laziness. The robe changes the way you move. Linen swishes faintly as you step, forcing you into a slower, more deliberate pace. Each movement becomes ceremonial, even if all you're doing is adjusting your hem. The sound of dozens of robes shifting at once creates a soft background susurration, like wind through reeds. It's strangely calming, a fabric lullaby woven into the night. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze mirror hanging on the wall. The image startles you. Gleaming scalp, wide eyes, white robe glowing faintly in the lamplight. You don't look like yourself anymore. You look like a figure pulled straight from the painted walls outside, one more anonymous servant in a long procession of the divine. For a second, you half expect hieroglyphs to appear around your head, labeling you with some grandiose title like Wiper of Lamps or Bearer of Oil Jars. One priest coughs softly, breaking your trance. He pulls his robe tighter and murmurs something under his breath about the night's duties. You fall into step behind him, the group moving as one toward the next chamber. The smell of oils intensifies with each pace, drifting on the warm air from behind heavy wooden doors. Your shaved skin prickles against the linen, a reminder that comfort is fleeting. The robe isn't pajamas, it's armor of purity, a daily reset button, an itchy badge of belonging. As you adjust the hem one last time, the door creaks open and a wave of rich fragrance greets you. Cedar, myrrh, and something faintly musky. The ointments await, and you realize your night is just beginning to get sticky. The door closes behind you with a muted thud, and suddenly the air grows heavy. What you smelled from outside now surrounds you fully. Thick, resinous, clinging to your nose and skin. Ointments and oils are arranged on low stone tables, each in small alabaster jars and clay pots, glowing faintly in the lamplight. This is where your freshly shaven body becomes less a person and more a polished vessel for the gods. You sit on another low stool, already slick from the last occupant, and a fellow priest approaches with a small bronze spatula. He dips it into a jar of dark cedar oil, thick as syrup, and smears it across your shoulders. The sensation is immediate. Warm, sticky, a little too much like being basted for roasting. You can't help but imagine yourself as a rotisserie chicken, though you wisely keep that joke to yourself. Here's a straightforward historical fact. Egyptians used oils constantly, not only for ritual purification, but also to protect skin from the desert sun. Myrrh, cedar, and lotus oil were especially popular, while animal fats like crocodile grease were sometimes blended in as binders. Yes, crocodile fat. You're not imagining it. The smell is faintly rancid, masked only by the stronger fragrances layered on top. Somewhere in your brain, a little voice whispers, "You are now a walking incense stick with reptile seasoning." The oil spreads across your arms, chest, and legs, leaving every inch of your skin glistening. It seeps into your freshly shaved pores, stinging slightly, but not enough to complain. The attendants hum softly as they work, their rhythm slow and hypnotic. Your own breath falls in line with the pace, long exhales matching the drag of the spatula across your back. A quirky tidbit adds some color here. Certain recipes for temple ointments included honey, not for its sweetness, but for its preservative qualities. Honey never spoils, and it created a sticky, glossy layer that clung stubbornly. You imagine rolling into bed afterward and instantly fusing with the sheets. Sweet dreams indeed. Historians still argue whether these elaborate anointings were strictly for major rituals or part of a nightly routine for priests in larger temples. Some scholars say only the high-ranking clergy got the full oil treatment, while junior priests had to settle for a quick splash. Tonight, though, you're lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you feel about smelling like a perfume shop exploded on you. The scent builds as more jars are opened. Myrrh, thick and smoky, coats your forearms. Lotus essence, light and floral, brushes across your throat. Cedar oil seeps into your scalp, leaving a sharp, woodsy tang. The mixture is overwhelming, yet oddly soothing. You feel wrapped not only in linen, but in an invisible cocoon of fragrance. It's as if the temple itself is absorbing you, rebranding you as one of its own. As the last streak of oil is rubbed onto your calves, you notice how slippery you've become. Standing feels like a hazard. One wrong move and you'll slide across the stone floor like an eel. You catch the eye of another priest who seems to be suppressing a smirk. Clearly, you're not the first to wobble during this stage. Somewhere in the temple's unrecorded history, there must have been at least one slapstick moment of a priest toppling mid-oiling, arms flailing, while the gods looked on in silent amusement. Your robe clings differently now, the linen catching on the oil and sticking in strange places. Every step will sound faintly like Velcro peeling. The sensation is distracting but also grounding. You are here, in this temple, in this moment, layered in scents and shine. The room grows warmer as more priests pass through, their collective fragrance thickening the air into a fog of sacred musk. Breathing feels like sipping incense tea. Your eyelids grow heavy from the heady mix, though sleep is still far away. The gods haven't been tended to yet, and until they're settled, you can't rest. You rise carefully, every joint glistening, and join the slow procession moving toward the next chamber. The murmur of voices grows louder. Lists of names, divine titles, prayers stacked higher than the columns outside. Your jaw tenses just thinking of what's ahead. The oiling was indulgent in its sticky way. The chanting will be a test of endurance. You shuffle forward, your linen robe clinging with every step, and the sound around you shifts from quiet murmurs to the steady drone of voices. This is the recital chamber, where words themselves become offerings. The priests gather in loose rows, each clutching a small scroll or simply closing their eyes, summoning endless lines of memorized text. You take your place, throat already dry, and prepare to recite the divine roll call. The first names tumble out in unison, a wave of syllables rolling across the chamber. You join in, stumbling at first, then catching the rhythm. Amun, Lord of the Thrones of the Two Lands. Ra, Falcon of the Dawn. Ta, Father of Craftsmen. The list keeps going, every god given their due, every epithet piled like bricks in a wall of sound. Your jaw works like a machine, lips moving automatically, voice blending into the drone. Here's the historical fact to anchor you. Egyptian priests maintained detailed liturgies, some containing hundreds of names and titles, all chanted to ensure no divine aspect felt neglected. To forget one was a cosmic faux pas, like forgetting your grandmother's birthday but multiplied by the number of deities in the pantheon. The stakes were high, order itself depended on memory. Your tongue soon feels heavy, as if the words are bricks you're hauling rather than sounds you're shaping. You glance sideways, and the priest beside you looks unfazed, his lips moving with mechanical precision, like someone reciting their grocery list. You, meanwhile, are sweating through your oiled skin. A quirky tidbit eases your suffering. Some gods had titles so redundant that even ancient scribes joked about it in marginal notes. Imagine being forced to chant, Lord of the Beginning, who began the beginnings for the 10th time in one night. You suspect some priest quietly shortened lines, muttering just enough syllables to fool their neighbors. Historians still argue whether these marathon recitations were intended to be literal prayers or more like ritual soundscapes, where the cadence mattered more than the meaning. Either way, your throat burns, your voice cracks, and you find yourself fantasizing about a cup of cool beer, even though that's technically reserved for the gods in the next chamber. The chant rises and falls, steady as the Nile's current. At times it lulls you into a trance, your mind wandering while your lips keep moving. You imagine yourself drifting in a reed boat, the words carrying you like ripples. Then someone stumbles on a syllable and the spell snaps. All eyes flick briefly to the offender and you silently thank the gods it wasn't you. The chamber itself helps amplify the drone. The walls are carved with hieroglyphs, the ceiling painted with stars, and as the sound bounces back, it seems like the gods themselves are mumbling along, You half expect the statues lining the hall to open their mouths and join in. Their stone eyes glint in the lamplight, reminding you they're the audience you're performing for. Your jaw aches, your lips dry, but you press on. The roll call stretches into what feels like eternity. You find small distractions to survive, counting how many times Mighty Bull is repeated, imagining each epithet as a quirky modern job title. Ra, the Solar CEO. Isis, Manager of Magical Assets. It's a childish game, but it keeps you from keeling over. At last, the chanting shifts to a lower, softer register. You feel the change like a cool breeze. The lists wind down, the last few names whispered rather than shouted. Silence descends, thick and welcome, broken only by the faint hiss of oil lamps. You exhale, shoulders slumping, jaw grateful for the break. But there's no rest yet. The gods have been named, and now they must be lit. A priest ahead of you steps forward with a clay lamp, flame flickering like a restless tongue. It's time to illuminate the sanctuary, to set the night fully in motion. The chamber darkens as the chanting fades, but in the quiet you hear the faintest crackle, the sound of flint against stone. Sparks leap, catch on a wick soaked in oil, and suddenly a flame dances in the gloom. One priest cradles the clay lamp like a newborn chick, careful not to spill a single drop. He steps forward and with solemn precision touches it to the first of many waiting lamps. One by one, flames bloom around the room. You take your own lamp, a small terracotta bowl with a stubby wick poking out, and lean toward the priest beside you. The fire leaps across like a secret passed hand to hand. Soon the sanctuary glows with dozens of flickering lights, shadows stretching tall and thin across the painted walls. Here's the historical fact. Lamps like these, fueled by castor or sesame oil, weren't just practical. They symbolized the presence of divine light, a reminder of Ra's eternal cycle. Even when the sun had vanished from the sky, his essence remained alive in every flame. Without these lamps, the night felt like chaos pressing at the walls. With them, order was restored. You shuffle forward, lamp in hand, toward the inner sanctum. The air grows warmer, thick with the mingling scents of oil and smoke. The statues carved into the walls seem to flicker in the firelight, their painted eyes winking as if alive. You pause to adjust your grip. The bowl is hot, and one careless tilt would mean a stain of oil down your pristine robe. You imagine explaining that mishap to the head priest. "Sorry, sir, Ra slipped out of my hands." Not the best career move. A quirky tidbit flickers into your thoughts. Some priests reportedly used mirrors of polished copper or bronze to redirect sunlight into the temple during the day, illuminating statues deep inside. At night, lamps replaced the sun, but the principle was the same. Light chasing away the shadows, ensuring the gods were never left in the dark. You glance at a bronze disc on the wall, its surface still faintly reflective, and wonder how many mornings it had been used to summon the first rays of dawn into this very chamber. Historians still argue whether the number of lamps mattered. Was it symbolic, tied to the stars above, or simply a case of the more light the better? Some texts mention precise counts, but archaeological digs reveal wildly inconsistent numbers. Tonight, though, no one's counting. The priority is filling the sanctuary with a glow strong enough to awaken the gods, but soft enough to keep the mood reverent. The effect is mesmerizing. Shadows ripple across hieroglyphs, making them seem to move. Figures carved in stone look like they're breathing, their painted lips whispering secrets you can't quite catch. You find yourself staring too long at one depiction of Horus, the falcon-headed god, his eyes gleaming with borrowed fire. You blink and remind yourself, it's just stone. Probably. As you move deeper, the lamp's smoke clings to your nose, a faint tickle that makes you want to sneeze. You clamp down hard, unwilling to disrupt the sacred silence with a honk. You recall the earlier joke in your head about sneezing mid-shave and decide this night has enough slapstick moments already. The priests place their lamps on narrow ledges along the sanctuary walls. You add yours to the row, watching as the flames line up like stars caught indoors. Together they form a constellation of order, a miniature night sky glowing within the temple. The thought makes your shoulders ease. Even here, locked away from the real heavens, the gods have their own starlight to watch over them. The chamber hums now, not with voices, but with the faint buzz of many flames. You swear you can hear them, tiny whispers of oil sizzling, wicks sighing. The air shimmers faintly, heat weaving like a veil. The glow settles into your skin, into your bones, and you feel as if you're part of the fire yourself, flickering in rhythm with the divine. But lamps are only the beginning. The gods may have their light, but they still expect their midnight meal. Priests begin to file toward the offering hall where trays of bread, figs, and beer wait in silence. You follow, your stomach giving a traitorous growl, though you already know none of this food is meant for you. The scent of burning oil fades behind you as the procession shifts into the offering hall. Here the air smells different. Yeast and grain, dried fruit, and faintly sour beer. Low stone tables line the walls, covered with trays piled high, round loaves of bread, bowls of dates, figs bursting with sweetness, fat onions, and jugs of dark beer. At first glance, it looks like a banquet for 100 hungry workers. And in a way, it is, except the guests of honor never actually eat. You step closer, the flicker of lamps catching the sheen of glazed pottery. The offerings are arranged with meticulous care, each type of food balanced against another as if the gods keep tally of calories. You're reminded of those modern buffets where everything looks perfect, but half of it goes untouched. That's basically the system here. Abundance as devotion, not consumption. A straightforward historical fact. Egyptians believed the gods required nourishment just like humans, but instead of chewing on figs or gulping beer, the divine essence of the food was absorbed during the ritual. Afterward, the leftovers were consumed by priests or redistributed to the temple staff. So yes, tomorrow morning, someone is having yesterday's divine beer for breakfast. Lucky them. The high priest steps forward, raising his arms and begins the quiet liturgy. Each food is named aloud, each placed deliberately before the statue's gaze. Bread is set down first, the staff of life. Beer follows, frothy in tall jugs, smelling faintly sour but oddly comforting. Fruit rounds out the display, gleaming like jewels in the lamplight. The statues stare silently, stone eyes locked on the meal they'll never chew. You're given the task of arranging a tray of onions and leeks, their pungent scent stinging your nose. You stifle a cough because the room is supposed to stay reverent, not echo with priestly sneezes. You place the vegetables carefully, aligning them as if the gods preferred neat geometry. Maybe they do. Maybe cosmic order starts with symmetrical onions. Here's a quirky tidbit. One ancient inscription mentions an offering list so long, it included honey cakes shaped like geese and cucumber water. It makes you wonder whether some priests got a little carried away, slipping in their personal favorites under the guise of devotion. Oh yes, mighty Ra, of course you'd like a dozen honey cakes. And I'll just sample one later. Quality control. Historians still argue whether these offerings were a daily necessity in all temples, or primarily for festival days. The scale of food found in some temple storehouses suggests constant use, but smaller shrines may have offered little more than bread and water. Tonight, though, the spread is generous. You're standing amid enough provisions to feed a small village. The chant grows softer, settling into a rhythm like a lullaby. Each phrase is accompanied by the clink of pottery, the scrape of trays against stone. You find yourself lulled by the sounds, your stomach still quietly protesting. After all, you skipped supper to get here. The bread smells maddeningly good, its crust still golden from the oven. You imagine tearing a piece off, dipping it in beer, and sighing with satisfaction. But you also imagine the gods zapping you on the spot for stealing their midnight snack. Probably not worth the risk. The hall feels timeless. For centuries, the same foods have been offered, the same prayers whispered, the same statues staring blankly ahead. You wonder if the gods ever get bored. Perhaps Osiris rolls his eyes each time another tray of onions appears. Or maybe the comfort lies in the repetition. The same flavors, the same gestures, night after night, eternity without surprises. When the last jug is set down, silence falls. The priests bow their heads, the air thick with bread and beer, and then slowly step back. The gods have been fed, spiritually at least. The food will sit for a while, absorbing the ritual energy before being whisked away to storerooms. For now, the hall remains heavy with abundance, a feast no one will touch. You glance once more at the loaves, your stomach growling loud enough to make the nearest priest glare at you. You offer a sheepish smile and step back into line, robe sticking faintly to your oiled skin. Midnight offerings completed, you're headed into the longest part of the night, guarding the sealed statues, while stone eyes and silent halls press down like a weighted blanket. The offering hall fades behind you, heavy with bread and beer, and now you enter the stillest chamber of the night. Here the air is thicker, the silence deeper. Massive stone statues loom, their faces carved with that timeless Egyptian calm, lips neither smiling nor frowning, eyes set wide and eternal. This is the sanctuary, and your duty now is simple in description but difficult in practice. You guard, you watch, you endure. The great doors creak as they close, sealing the gods within. The sound echoes down the stone corridors like the groan of an old ship. You stand with the others, back straight, lamps in hand, shadows stretching along the floor. The statues do not move, of course, yet you feel their gaze upon you as if your bald scalp and oil-slicked skin are under inspection. A firm historical fact. In Egyptian temples, statues of gods were treated as living embodiments of the divine. They were washed, dressed, fed, and then sealed away until morning, when the cycle began again. Priests acted as caretakers, attendants to beings who never blinked or breathed, but were considered more alive than any mortal. You glance up at the statue of Amun, towering above the rest, painted with faint traces of color that centuries haven't erased. His crown catches the lamplight, throwing long shadows. You shift your weight, suddenly aware of how heavy silence can be. Minutes pass like hours when stone eyes never waver. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some sanctuaries contained false doors carved into walls, believed to allow spirits to pass in and out. You imagine one now hidden in the gloom, with gods slipping casually through like neighbors borrowing sugar. The idea both comforts and unsettles you because if they can come and go at will, what's the point of you standing guard? Maybe you're here not to keep things out, but to keep yourself in. Historians still argue whether this night watch was purely symbolic or whether the priests truly believed the statues were vulnerable in darkness. Perhaps guarding was less about danger and more about devotion, staying awake so the gods wouldn't be left alone. In a way, you're babysitting eternity, rocking stone children with your presence until dawn. The hours stretch. You shift from one foot to the other, robes swishing faintly, oil making the fabric cling in odd patches. You try not to cough, not to sigh too loudly. The flickering lamps create tricks of light, and more than once you're sure a statue's head tilts, just a fraction, just enough to make your heart lurch. Then the shadow shifts, and you realize it's only flame-playing games. Your eyelids grow heavy. The drone of earlier chants still echoes in your skull, lulling you like a distant lullaby. You catch yourself swaying, nearly nodding off and jolt awake. One of the senior priests shoots you a glare sharp enough to slice papyrus. You stand straighter, cheeks warming. Falling asleep here is more than embarrassing. It's sacrilege. Time crawls. You count cracks in the floor, memorize the curves of hieroglyphs, trace imaginary constellations between chips in the stone. Your mind drifts, conjuring odd thoughts. Do the gods get lonely at night? Do they whisper to one another when the lamps burn low? Or do they sit in silence, content with the steady heartbeat of the temple around them? The stillness becomes a presence of its own. You feel your pulse slow, your breath deepen. The statues no longer seem accusing but companionable. They've stood here for centuries. What's one more night with you for company? You lean into that thought, letting the silence become a blanket, wrapping around your shoulders heavier than any robe. And then, just when you think you can't endure another moment, a faint sound cuts through. The rustle of paws, the whisper of feathers. You glance toward the shadows, and sure enough, other guardians are arriving, not human ones. The temple's animal companions are stirring, ready to keep watch alongside you. The rustle grows louder, not the shuffle of sandals, but the soft patter of paws on stone. Out of the shadows slips a sleek temple cat, its fur catching the lamplight in patches of bronze and black. Its tail flicks lazily as if unimpressed by your solemn vigil, and it winds between your ankles like it owns the place. Which, in a way, it does. In Egypt, cats weren't pets so much as colleagues of the divine. The cat pauses beneath the statue of Bastet, goddess of protection, and curls into a tidy loaf, purring so loudly you swear the stone walls hum with it. You suppress a smile. The contrast between the stiff, oiled priest and the relaxed, snoring feline is almost comical. You're supposed to look like a guardian of cosmic order, but the cat is clearly the real boss here. Here's a solid historical fact. Cats were indeed sacred in Egypt, often housed in temples and considered extensions of Bastet herself. They kept rodents at bay, guarded food stores, and served as living reminders of divine presence. Harm one, and you risked severe punishment. Even accidental deaths caused a public outcry. Then comes the flutter of wings. An ibis, long-beaked and solemn, lands on a high perch near the statue of Thoth. It ruffles its feathers, stares down with an expression that can only be described as judgmental, and lets out a sharp croak. The priests don't flinch, but you do. Somehow the bird's gaze feels harsher than any human supervisor's. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. Some temples kept crocodiles as sacred animals too, especially in worship of Sobek. Imagine trying to nod off on guard duty with a fat, half-submerged crocodile lurking nearby. At least cats and ibises are relatively quiet. Sobek's priest had to endure the occasional splash and ominous jaw snap in the dark. Historians still argue whether these animals were genuinely seen as incarnations of gods or simply symbols kept for ritual pageantry. Evidence suggests both. Some were pampered, fed delicacies, even mummified with care. Others may have been more practical mascots. Either way, tonight you treat them as fellow guardians because honestly, the ibis looks like it could report you to higher management if you slouch again. The silence of the sanctuary softens with their presence. The cat stretches, yawns, and begins to knead the floor with tiny paws, claws clicking faintly. The ibis tucks its head under its wing, dozing but still eerily alert. You realize you feel less alone now. The gods have company in flesh and feather, not just stone. Your fellow priests seem unbothered, accustomed to these nightly intrusions. One even sneaks a hand down to scratch behind the cat's ears as it passes. The animal leans into the touch, purring louder, before sauntering off to inspect a tray of offerings. You watch, amused as it sniffs a loaf of bread with disdain and bats a fig off the table. Divine essence consumed or not, figs apparently don't pass feline quality control. You stifle a laugh, covering your mouth with your sleeve. The ibis glances down, eyes narrow, as if scolding you for unprofessional conduct. You straighten immediately, trying to look as solemn as possible while your shoulders tremble. Somehow this feels more dangerous than sneezing during the lamplighting. Time passes differently with the animals nearby. The cat's rhythmic purring, the ibis's occasional feather rustle, create a natural metronome. Your breathing slows to match it. You start to feel the night stretching long and pliable like warm wax. The statue's stares seem less harsh now, softened by the reminder that the gods themselves can take humble forms. Still, the duties continue. You shift your weight, roll your shoulders, and keep your eyes open. The vigil isn't done, and sleep is not yet allowed. But with the cat curled at your feet and the ibis watching from above, you feel steadier. Less like a lone sentinel, more like part of a quiet, curious team. And just when you think the night has settled into its rhythm, you hear a different sound, a murmur of voices, hushed but urgent. The priests are beginning to whisper about their dreams, trading visions like secret bedtime stories. You lean in, curious. After all, in a world where gods inhabit stone and animals share the sanctuary, who's to say dreams aren't messages too? The hush of the sanctuary thickens, but it isn't the silence of stone anymore. It's the kind of hush that comes when people lean closer, voices lowered, sharing secrets not meant for the daylight. One priest shifts his weight, clears his throat softly, and begins to murmur about a dream he had the previous night. You catch fragments, a field of reeds, a shining disk, a falcon that wouldn't land. His companions nod slowly, eyes half-lidded, as though weighing every image for hidden meaning. You edge nearer, curious. In this temple, dreams aren't just idle nighttime nonsense. They're possible messages from the gods. Egyptians believed sleep thinned the veil between the divine and human realms. A dream could be prophecy, or nonsense, or indigestion disguised as revelation. And tonight, you're part of the circle of half-whispered interpretations. Here's your historical anchor. Egyptians often consulted dream books, collections of recorded visions and their possible meanings. To dream of drinking cool water? Good. Long life ahead. To dream of being bitten by a dog? Bad. An enemy at your heels. Of course, most priests didn't have scrolls handy at midnight, so interpretation became a mix of tradition and creative guesswork. The next priest leans in, his whispers so soft you have to strain. He saw a crocodile swimming backward. The group murmurs in interest, and one suggests it could mean Sobek is restless. Another shrugs, saying perhaps it only means he ate too much garlic with dinner. You hide a smile. Even in sacred spaces, indigestion gets blamed for odd visions. A quirky tidbit. Some Egyptians intentionally sought dream incubation by sleeping in temple chambers, hoping for divine visions. Pilgrims would curl up near statues, inhaling incense, fasting, chanting before sleep, all to coax a godly message. You picture a weary farmer dozing on cold stone, waking with a vision of a cow and insisting it meant eternal prosperity. Maybe it did. Maybe it just meant he missed his herd. Historians still argue whether dream interpretation was a formal priestly duty or more of a casual pastime woven into nightly routines. In some records, priests act as professional interpreters, decoding dreams for others. In others, it seems like late-night gossip dressed up as divine consultation. Tonight, it feels like both, a blend of solemnity and small chuckles as stories trade hands. The whispers ripple around you. One priest claims he dreamed of being locked in a chest, floating down the Nile. Another dreamed of endless bread loaves, stacking higher and higher until they blotted out the sky. The group chuckles softly at that one, and someone mutters that maybe Ra himself is just reminding the bakery crew not to slack tomorrow. Your own eyelids flutter as you listen. The cadence of voices, low, steady, rhythmic, is soothing. You let yourself drift in and out of their meanings, the details blurring into a stream of reeds, crocodiles, loaves, and falcons. The stone chamber seems to breathe with them, the gods silently leaning in to eavesdrop on mortal musings. You realize that sharing dreams serves another purpose too. It breaks the monotony of the vigil. Standing in silence for hours could crack even the most disciplined mind. But whispering about visions, real or fabricated, keeps the group awake, bonded, reminded they're not alone in the long stretch between midnight and dawn. As one priest finishes recounting a dream of climbing a ladder to the stars, another sighs and shakes his head. Or perhaps, he whispers with dry humor, we simply dream because our robes itch, our stomachs ache, and we smell like crocodile oil. The circle erupts into quiet chuckles, quickly stifled before echo can betray them. Even the ibis gives a sharp croak, as if to remind everyone of their place. The laughter fades, replaced once more by the drone of breathing, the occasional shuffle of feet. You settle back into your position, mind wandering. Perhaps tonight you'll dream too, of lamps and figs, of cats curling at your side, of gods who smile faintly but never speak. But before sleep can claim you, the priests are moving again. One gestures toward a smaller chamber where jars and amulets await. It's time for the next ritual, the curious world of bedtime cures, charms against nightmares, and the strange belief that garlic and honey could guard the soul. The circle of whispered dreams dissolves as the priests shuffle toward a narrow chamber. You follow, robe sticking faintly where oil has soaked into the linen, and step into a room that smells sharper than incense. Acrid, herbal, faintly sweet. Clay jars line the walls, each sealed with wax or cloth, and low tables gleam with bronze amulets, frog-shaped figurines, and bundles of dried plants. This is where the temple guards against nightmares, against restless spirits, against the things that creep when eyes are closed. A senior priest gestures toward a small jar, and another uncorks it. The scent of garlic hits instantly, pungent and raw, filling your nose until your eyes water. Garlic was a common protection charm, believed to ward off evil. You rub a slice across your palms, the juice sticky, and wonder whether it really keeps malevolent spirits away, or just keeps everyone at arm's length. Either way it works. The nearest priest gives you a wide berth, pretending it's reverence when it's really self-preservation. Here's your straightforward fact. Egyptians used garlic and honey in both medicine and ritual. Honey, antibacterial and long-lasting, was smeared on wounds but also on lips or tongues to sweeten speech before prayers. Tonight it's dribbled onto your fingertip and dabbed behind your ears. You feel ridiculous, as though you're preparing for a strange date with the gods. A dash of honey, a smear of garlic, and crocodile oil already on your skin. Truly irresistible. A quirky tidbit. Frog-shaped amulets, like the little ones lined up here, were often used to ward off nightmares. Frogs symbolized fertility and renewal, croaking after the Nile floods. Some priests swore by them, placing one near their beds to scare away demons of the night. You pick one up, cool stone smoothed by many hands, and imagine it croaking softly at intruding spirits. Not tonight, buddy. Historians still argue whether these bedtime cures were taken literally by all priests or whether some knew perfectly well they were symbolic props. Skeptical voices in ancient texts suggest not everyone bought into frog figurines as demon repellents. Still, tradition mattered more than personal belief. Better to smell of garlic and clutch a frog than risk divine disfavor. The ritual continues. A priest crushes herbs into a bowl, mixing them with wine, the scent bitter and grassy. He dips a reed brush and flicks droplets into the corners of the chamber, muttering charms. The splashes leave faint stains, and you wonder if future archaeologists will puzzle over them, writing long papers about ritual herb stains, never realizing someone simply got over-enthusiastic with the brush. You're handed a small amulet in the shape of a djed pillar, symbol of stability. Its surface is warm from another priest's hand. You grip it tightly, feeling the grooves press into your palm. The weight is oddly reassuring. In a world of flickering lamps and endless chants, this little stone feels like an anchor. The chamber hums with low voices as each man receives his charm. One priest tucks his frog under his robe, another ties a cord around his neck, another smears more garlic on his wrists like perfume. The smell is thick, overpowering the incense lingering from earlier. If nightmares are deterred by pungency, no one here will dream of anything but onions and garlic cloves. The ibis overhead rustles its feathers, clearly unimpressed, while the temple cat prowls in, nose twitching. It approaches the honey jar, sneaks a lick, and then recoils, licking its chops with theatrical disgust. A ripple of quiet laughter spreads, quickly muffled. You can't help but think that even the gods enjoy these small comic breaks, slipping humor into sacred spaces. You feel a little lighter now, talisman in hand, honey tacky behind your ear, garlic sharp in your nose. The night stretches long, but you're better armed against its shadows. Maybe the charms really work. Maybe they don't. Either way, you're calmer for the ritual. As the last amulet is distributed, the priests begin moving toward the open stairway that climbs the temple's outer wall. A cool breeze slips through, carrying the scent of night air. Above, the stars wait, bright, ancient, steady. It's time to leave the herbs behind and ascend to the roof, where the cosmos itself becomes the temple's ceiling. The stairs climb steeply, worn smooth by centuries of sandaled feet. You grip the stone wall for balance, your linen robe whispering around your ankles, the faint smell of garlic still clinging to your hands. The air grows cooler with each step, until finally you emerge onto the broad temple roof. A vast night stretches above, clear, sharp, alive with stars. For the first time tonight, the smoke and closeness of the sanctuary give way to open sky. You pause, shivering a little as the breeze cuts through your oiled skin. The chill is sharp but bracing, like plunging into the Nile again. The roof is flat with low parapets along the edges. Priests spread out, each finding a place to stand or sit, their shaved heads gleaming like pale moons in the starlight. Above you, the Milky Way arcs across the darkness, a band of glittering dust that Egyptians once thought of as a celestial river. Here's your historical fact. Egyptian priests were deeply invested in astronomy. They tracked the rising of Sirius, which heralded the Nile flood, and mapped star clocks on temple ceilings. The sky wasn't just decoration, it was a divine calendar, a schedule for rituals, a reminder that time itself was sacred. Looking up now, you understand why. The stars are impossibly steady, a reminder that chaos hasn't yet won. You tilt your head back until your neck aches, eyes trying to drink in every point of light. A priest beside you murmurs about Sopdet, Sirius, bright in the east. Another points toward Orion, calling it the Osiris constellation. Their voices are soft, reverent, like bedtime storytellers recounting myths under the open sky. A quirky tidbit. Some Egyptians believed the stars were the souls of the blessed dead, shining eternally in the heavens. It means the sky wasn't just distant fire, it was family. You can almost hear the whisper of ancient laughter, millions of lights above you blinking like eyes too far away to focus. If you've ever lain in bed staring at glow-in-the-dark stickers on your ceiling, this is the original version, except infinitely more impressive. Historians still argue whether priests used the stars more for practical purposes, timing agriculture, predicting floods, or primarily for religious symbolism. The truth is, probably both. Standing here, you feel how impossible it would be to separate the two. To measure the heavens was to worship them. To watch the sky was to converse with gods. The wind whistles softly against the stone, carrying scents of desert sand and faint river water from far below. You draw your robe tighter, oil making it cling, but you don't mind. The chill clears your head, washing away the heaviness of incense and chanting. For a moment, you feel almost free. Not a servant locked in a temple, but a small figure cradled beneath the universe. The ibis flaps overhead, wings catching starlight before settling on a parapet. It croaks once as if in agreement with the constellations. The temple cat, ever contrary, curls against a warm stone slab, ignoring the cosmos entirely. You stifle a laugh, the sound muffled by the wind. Around you, priests murmur softly, comparing notes on the constellations, debating which star rose first, which god it might represent. Their voices drift into gentle argument, but the tone is drowsy, not sharp. This is the language of men who have spent too many nights under the same sky, chasing meanings that slip like sand between their fingers. You lean back, palms against the cool stone, eyelids heavy. The stars blur, then sharpen again as you blink. You're tired, but the sky won't let you sleep yet. It hums with secrets, and the longer you stare, the more you feel part of it. A small star blinking back at the endless river above. And then from below, faint voices rise. the scribes gossiping in a side chamber, their tones sharper than the dream whispers earlier. You glance toward the stairwell, curiosity tugging you. Apparently, even under the gaze of eternity, humans can't resist talking about math, taxes, and sandals. You descend from the roof, stars still glittering in your vision, and follow the murmur of voices toward a side hall lit with fewer lamps. The air here is warmer, heavy with ink and parchment smells, the kind of space where minds work even at midnight. A cluster of scribes hunches over low desks, reed pens scratching against papyrus. Their whispers float through the room, half debate, half idle chatter, and you realize that even in the heart of sacred ritual, gossip finds a foothold. One scribe leans back, gesturing with his pen, and complains softly about the latest calculations for pyramid construction. The numbers don't add up, he mutters, unless you count every worker twice. Another chuckles, reminding him that perhaps the gods like their monuments bigger than human math can explain. You suppress a smile. Imagine staying up all night, arguing about geometry while the universe turns quietly overhead. Here's your historical fact. Temple scribes were essential to Egyptian ritual life, recording offerings, prayers, and astronomical observations. Their math and writing ensured the cycles continued unbroken. Without them, the chants would vanish into air, the lamps into smoke, unremembered. Yet here they are, joking about fractions and groaning about ink stains, as human as any tired student bent over homework. A quirky tidbit: some scribes doodled in margins, little sketches of animals, exaggerated gods, or even crude jokes. One ostracon, a pottery shard used for practice, shows a cat herding geese while a mouse plays harp. It seems even in the most solemn halls, boredom bred humor. Looking at the priests here, you imagine similar doodles hidden under papyrus stacks. A stick figure raw wearing sunglasses, perhaps, or Amun juggling onions. Historians still argue whether temple scribes truly shared authority with priests or remained firmly subservient. Some evidence suggests they had enormous influence, controlling knowledge that priests depended on. Others say they were simply glorified clerks. Tonight, listening to their sharp tongues and confident laughter, you'd guess the truth leaned closer to power than paperwork. The conversation drifts. One man mutters about sandals. Apparently, a new delivery of reed fiber pairs was poorly made, soles cracking after only a few days. His neighbor quips that perhaps the sandal makers shaved off quality along with their hair. Suppressed snickers ripple through the group. You picture priests slipping mid-procession, sandals flapping, and nearly lose your composure. Then the topic shifts to taxes, a subject as eternal as the stars. A scribe recounts how villagers grumbled about grain levies, claiming their fields hadn't flooded enough to yield properly. Another shakes his head, saying the officials never listen. The gods demand balance, he sighs, but tax collectors demand more. The group nods grimly, then quickly laughs again, one remarking that at least cats pay their dues in mice. The ibis perched nearby croaks, startling one scribe so badly his pen jerks, leaving an ink blot. He curses under his breath, quickly scraping at the papyrus. The others stifle laughter while you bite your tongue, shoulders shaking. Even at midnight, under the eyes of the gods, slapstick has its place. Their gossip weaves on, blending sacred duty with ordinary complaints. It strikes you that these men, tasked with preserving cosmic order, are also just weary workers trying to stay awake, filling the long hours with banter. The temple may be eternal, but its people are human, flawed, and funny. That realization makes the night feel lighter, less crushing. The chatter quiets as the head priest enters, giving the scribes a stern look. Pens return to papyrus, backs straighten, and silence swells again. The moment passes, but the echoes of their laughter linger, tucked in the stone like graffiti no chisel could carve. The lamps burn lower now, wicks shortened, oil thinning. The night is nearing its close. The gods have been fed, lit, guarded, amused with gossip and dreams. Now the sanctuary waits for its final ritual. The closing at dawn, when doors creak shut, incense dies, and weary priests like you stumble home under the rising sun. The lamps gutter low, their flames shrinking to faint blue tips, and the temple air grows dense with the smell of cooling oil. Your body feels heavy now, skin sticky beneath the robe, eyelids like stone lids themselves. A bell note echoes once, low, hollow, and the priests begin their final procession of the night. This is the moment of closure when the sanctuary is sealed and the gods are left to rest in silence until morning. The sanctuary doors loom ahead, bronze hinges gleaming faintly in the dying light. Two priests step forward, arms straining as they push the heavy panels inward. The groan of stone on stone fills the hall, a sound older than memory, a sound that has marked countless nights like this one. You stand with the others, head bowed, waiting as the statues fade into shadow, their eyes still glimmering with the last flickers of lamplight. Here's your historical fact. Priests closed the sanctuary each night after rituals, believing the gods needed privacy to regenerate their power for the coming dawn. In their worldview, this act wasn't symbolic. It was functional. Without it, the sun might hesitate to rise. Closing the door was not unlike tucking the universe itself into bed. You clutch your Djed amulet in one hand, its grooves pressing gently into your palm. The honey behind your ear has dried sticky, garlic still clings to your fingertips, and yet the combination feels oddly comforting. You've been scrubbed, shaved, oiled, robed, and anointed with every charm imaginable. You smell like a banquet and a spice shop collided, but you are technically ritually pure. A quirky tidbit surfaces as the final incense is lit. Some temples used elaborate locking systems, with multiple keys held by different priests, to ensure no one disturbed the gods at night. Imagine trying to sneak a midnight snack from the offering trays, only to realize the sanctuary is locked like a treasure chest. Somewhere, you're sure, at least one unlucky priest rattled a barred door inside. Historians still argue whether the act of closing was seen as an ending or merely a pause. Did the gods truly sleep behind those doors, or did they remain eternally alert? The texts are vague, open to debate, but in this moment, the ritual feels like closure. Final chants whispered, incense curling upward, lamps snuffed one by one. The priests bow deeply as the doors seal shut, the final clang echoing through the chamber. Silence swells again, thicker than ever. The statues are gone from view, but their presence hums in the stone. The sanctuary is both emptier and heavier at once. Your body aches as you straighten. Every muscle is stiff, every joint sore from standing, chanting, kneeling. You realize you've been awake most of the night, sustained only by ritual momentum. The prospect of stumbling home, collapsing onto a reed mat, and finally drifting into oblivion is sweeter than any offering laid at the gods' feet. The group files slowly through the outer halls. Columns rise around you, dark now, their painted lotus tops barely visible. The stars above have begun to pale, their brilliance softening in the faintest hint of dawn. Cool air seeps in as the gates creak open. Beyond them, the Nile breathes mist into the morning, water silvering in the early light. You step outside, blinking at the horizon. Birds stir in the reeds. Croaking frogs fall silent, and the first fishermen push out their boats. The city wakes even as you long for sleep. Your duties are complete, the gods secured for the night, and you, oiled, shaved, purified, are nothing more than a weary figure trudging back to bed. And as you make your way down the temple path, you realize that in some odd, soothing way, the whole ordeal has been its own lullaby. Each ritual, each chant, each scrape of razor and smear of oil has slowed your breath, emptied your thoughts, softened you into drowsiness. The gods may demand vigilance, but your body whispers another truth. Sleep is the final offering. Wind down. 300 words. The night softens now, the edges of the temple blurring as though the stone itself exhales. The air is cooler, gentler, brushing your bare scalp with a touch that feels almost like a blessing. You walk slower, each step lighter as if the rituals you endured have already begun to dissolve into dream. The incense lingers faintly on your skin, but its sharpness is fading, leaving only the ghost of sweetness. Your robe hangs loose, whispering against your legs, no longer a uniform but a blanket. Even the distant chatter of the waking city feels muted, softened by the still hush of dawn. You think back over the night, the cold Nile water, the scrape of razors, the sticky balm of oils, the drone of names that seemed endless. At the time, each moment was a trial, a demand. Yet now, strung together, they blur into rhythm, a slow and steady cadence like a heartbeat. The memory rocks you gently like a boat drifting down the river. Above you, the last stars fly,